TRISH, the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, to collect data and biological samples from the crew before, during, and after this historic spaceflight. Part of NASA's Human Research Program, TRISH is a virtual institute that finds and funds disruptive science and medical technology in order to reduce health and performance.
Four good suits.
Copy that, Dragon. We see the same. The closeout team will perform final closeout steps and then exit the capsule. Please report when ready to close the hatch.
Sounds like suit leak checks have been completed. And TRISH is a virtual institute that finds and funds disruptive...
Copy that, SpaceX. We're ready for side hatch closure when you are.
Copy that, Dragon.
Pausing for comms. Disruptive science and medical technology in order to reduce health and performance risks in space explorers.
Yeah, as we're getting ready to close out the side hatch, let's check in with Kate to take a closer look at the experiments the Inspiration4 crew will conduct during their 3 days in orbit.
Thanks, Andy. I'm joined now by Diana Dial from our space operations team here in Hawthorne, and we're going to take a closer look at the research that the Inspiration4 crew will be conducting on orbit.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me, and great to be here. We're going to be talking about some of the biomedical research experiments that will be flying on Inspiration4 today. So off the bat, why are we even doing this? Obviously, our goal is to make spaceflight accessible and safe to everybody. And that means making sure that we understand what happens to the human body when folks go to space. Plus, with a lot of these experiments, we're also getting a better understanding of how to revolutionize healthcare here on Earth.
Now, that seems kind of like an interesting point because a lot of people assume that science done in space doesn't have anything to do with those of us that are still on planet Earth. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the things we see here and how they'll benefit not only us, those of us in space, but also those of us on Earth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so off the bat, the technologies that we use for space, particularly for medicine, are actually miniaturized, they're mobile, and they can be used by non-physician or non-medically trained individuals. So that means that we can expand access to places where otherwise it's super remote, you might not have a medical provider, and these same technologies that we're going to be using, for example, on Inspiration4, we use in remote care environments here on Earth.
And that handheld portion seems super important because
Absolutely.
In space, weight is everything. So I believe this is an ultrasound reader, and if you're familiar with ultrasound machines, they're usually much bigger and require a lot of training to operate and not possible to go to space. But this is actually what's going to be on board Dragon today.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the Butterfly Ultrasound. Normally, you guys may be familiar with an ultrasound that you see at the hospital, and it'll be about the size of this table. But this ultrasound device is not only handheld, portable, but also, as we said, can be used by a non-medically trained individual. So during Inspiration4, our astronauts are actually going to be doing medical imaging while in space to better understand how body fluids change in the microgravity environment.
Now, in terms of the other things that we have on the table, I feel like, well, obviously the glasses are the coolest looking. We'll get to those. But how does this actually, like, how do they read when they're viewing, the ultrasound themselves? How do they actually get a readout for that?
Sure. So essentially, this ultrasound just plugs into an iPad or an iPhone. And essentially what they do is they'll plug it in, they'll use a little bit of gel, and then actually be able to apply it to themselves to visualize a number of organ systems in the body. So, for example, due to the fluid shifts in space, we want to make sure that we understand how blood flow moves in the microgravity environment, what happens to the bladder, for example, when it comes to urinary retention, and also we want to see how those fluid shifts could affect, for example, intracranial pressure. And so one of the analogous things that we'll be measuring is ultrasound on the eye. So all of these can be measured super easily using this just plugged in to an iPad or a phone.
And of course, that's important because intracranial fluid impacts vision, and vision changes while you're in space.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to get to the glasses.
Yeah.
They look like fun 3D glasses, but there's no 3D movies on this particular Dragon mission. So can you tell us a little bit about what those are used for and how they're helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. So while these look like a very cool prop, they are in fact for science. So what these glasses do is essentially a number of neurovestibular type of tests. So rewind, when we're here on Earth, our body is adapted to the gravity environment. And that means that folks essentially are able to orient to where they are located in physical space based on connection between the eyes, the inner ears, and the brain. And so what you do with this test is actually put on these glasses. And because
Can I try them on?
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you can see, Kate not only looks really cool, and everything's purple, but if you are to just use one at a time, the idea is that we're actually able to lateralize and localize different halves of the neurovestibular system to better understand when folks are doing a specific set of tests while wearing these glasses, how their adaptation to the spaceflight environment affects how they feel oriented and potentially might have space motion sickness, might feel dizzy or nauseous while they're in microgravity, and then once they return back to Earth.
So in terms of how, like, if I put these glasses on, how are you actually testing what I'm seeing?
Sure. So what would happen is that they would wear these glasses. They'll actually be doing some tests on something like this iPad. And then the results of those tests tell us basically which side and potentially more about what's going on with their neurovestibular system. Again, both in flight and then when they return.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diana Dial from our Space Ops team here at SpaceX in Hawthorne. Thank you so much for joining us and showing us firsthand some of the science that the Inspiration4 crew will be getting up to over the next 3 days. Let's check back in with Andy to see what's happening out on that pad.
Thanks, Kate and Diana. Super cool experiments. So right now, over the next couple minutes, the crew will be completing final inspections of the spacecraft, followed by hatch close. And so the crew is doing a sweep inside of Dragon to make sure there isn't any foreign object debris, what we like to refer to as FOD. Basically, anything that doesn't belong, that shouldn't be inside Dragon, we want to make sure that that is not there anymore. So right now is a view of the Dragon capsule and the crew access arm to the right-hand side. The Inspiration4 crew members are inside the top section of the Dragon capsule right now. And for those that are just joining us, this is a view from Kennedy Space Center in Florida off of historic launch pad 39A. We are about 2 hours away from liftoff. Everything is looking great today. Weather is looking great, and the crew has just been nothing but a bundle of joy since leaving the hangar, and super excited to be on a part of the mission.
It's crazy to think that, Andy, like you said, this is historic. It's pad 39A at Kennedy, and we can see the Atlantic Ocean there off the coast. And it's really crazy to think that, you know, just in the, what was 1969 was whenever we launched Apollo 11, which was, of course, the first mission that actually landed on the moon. And here we are a few decades later, I should say, launching the first orbital all-civilian crew. And we keep saying all-civilian, and what that really means is non-professional astronauts. So people like us four, and that are now going to space from the very same ground that, you know, Apollo 11 launched from decades ago. And it's, you know, just this transition and evolution of human spaceflight is so awesome to see. And of course, you know, we have a beautiful picture perfect background today. And it's just pretty incredible, and we're very thankful that we're able to you know, introduce the next era of human spaceflight from this ground. You know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and everyone inside that capsule knows that as well.
Yeah, we talked about the Apollo missions and the Space Shuttle missions. Since SpaceX took over the lease in 2014, we have also been making a little bit of history ourselves. In 2018, we debuted the Falcon Heavy rocket test flight. And for those that remember, that launched Starman. Yeah. And Starman is out there right now in his Tesla, exploring space.
Listening to David Bowie.
Listening to David Bowie. Last year, we also returned... last year, we also returned crewed flight from American soil with the Demonstration 2 mission with Bob and Doug. And we also had our first operational crew mission last November as well. So
yeah, and that's actually
to march forward.
And that's actually the capsule that's flying today.
Yes.
That first operational crew mission, Crew 1, which launched in November 2020, that is the same capsule that the Inspiration4 crew is flying in today. We like to refer to it as certified pre-owned.
Yeah, and everything that Kate and Andy just mentioned, without all of that, we wouldn't be here today. And it's incredible to think that literally our 4 all-civilian crew members are sitting in the Dragon capsule right now, about to make the next step in human spaceflight. We've always talked about, even before we were flying crew, that we always wanted to turn rockets into airplanes. Like, how do we turn how do we turn such a difficult, costly flight into a more affordable and more often flight? And this is one step closer to that major step today, and just so exciting that we're actually here.
Absolutely. Yeah, reusability really is the thing that unlocks access to space. And personally, I am super excited for more people to be able to experience space, because there's something known as the overview effect. And that's essentially the effect that humans experience when they're able to look back upon planet Earth from a different perspective. And I honestly believe that, the more people that get to experience that, the better off planet Earth will be, as well as the human civilization.
Yeah, Dragon today is going to be flying 4 people. It can hold up to 7, so hopefully in the near future we'll see 7 folks flying in Dragon. It is, again, the first private spacecraft to take humans to the space station, and will be the first private spacecraft to ever take an all-civilian crew to space and orbit. So we've got a really cool animation here of our Dragon vehicle.
So as we mentioned before, the pressurized section, the section that we actually see the crew in, is there at the top. The nose cone will open up and reveal the cupola, the observation dome, and we'll can't wait to see all the exciting views that they're going to see from there. And then if you look at the bottom portion, which the lighter side is reflecting towards us, we'll call it the Jedi side, and then the dark side now. I told you, Team Star Wars all the way. The dark side, which is actually the solar panels, which are one of my favorite things. We build them in-house here at SpaceX, integrate them onto the trunk, and that trunk will not be making its journey home. Unfortunately, that is not one of the reusable components of Dragon. It will be jettisoned prior to the capsule's re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere.
The capsule is what the crew will live in for the next 3 days. The volume of the Dragon is about 328 cubic feet. So once they're in space and in microgravity, they'll be able to utilize that entire space. And with the cupola, they'll actually get just a little bit more room. They get a little bit more volume inside of that capsule.
Yeah, the Dragon capsule itself also is outfitted with some engines. We have 16 Draco engines built into Dragon. We also have 8 Super Draco engines built into 4 separate pods. Super Draco engines are used as part of the launch escape system. We actually disarm that after we get into orbit. When we're in space, the Draco engines take over, and that will do a number of things. Micro adjustments in orbit, as also raising the orbit altitude later on after they depart from the second stage of Falcon 9.
Yeah, so you mentioned orbit there. Dragon is actually going to be orbiting higher than the International Space Station and higher than the Hubble telescope. It'll be orbiting at about 575 kilometers. And like we mentioned before, that observation dome is brand new to this mission. And from that height, views from the space station are amazing, but this crew is going even further. In fact, I think we have some footage of the cupola, and which is one of my favorite things now on Dragon. It's just a gorgeous piece of hardware. Like I said, it's brand new to this mission.
Dragon, SpaceX Stand by for transition to pad hatch closed. Please ensure that all items are secure from now through launch.
And copy that, SpaceX standing by.
There on your screen, we can see the pad closeout team closing the side hatch, which is one of the last visual things that we'll see here in the crew access arm.
The crew looks so excited. I think every little milestone, even if it's within 5 minutes, they get very excited. And I think they know what to expect. They've practiced this so many times. But this is the real thing right now. So this is the real hatch closure before they lift off. And they will close the hatch, inflate a seal, perform. They'll torque the hatch down and then perform some leak checks on that hatch.
Yeah, they'll inflate that seal and hold pressure to it for a few minutes and monitor that pressure to make sure that there's no leakage. And once we get confirmation of that, they'll basically put on the door on the door. It's a small piece that will actually go on where that torquing area is, which you can sort of see it there behind the closeout lead number 9 there on the right-hand side. But yeah, this process can take a few minutes, so they must be super excited. They can still hear the voices of the closeout team, but they can't go to space just yet. We're just under T-minus 2 hours until that happens.
Now, Kate, as you mentioned, T-minus 2 hours. In the timeline, they're right on the timeline. The plan was T-minus 2 hours to initiate the closing of the hatch. So the good news is on the Dragon side, everything's running just as planned. Falcon 9 side, again, folks checking in on station, but still fairly quiet on the launch vehicle for about another hour. And not to dwell on negative, but we have had, in the case of one of the NASA crew missions, we close the hatch. I think there's a little bit of debris got caught in the seal. We caught that, we open it up. So there's even time in the procedure to be able to reopen the hatch if we have to, clean things up a little bit, close it, and retest it again. That's why we've got all the way until T-minus 1 hour before the SpaceX egress team there that you see finally has to get off of the pad.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that was Crew 1 that occurred on.
Does look like that closeout tech is cleaning the hatch doorway there. Make sure that there is no debris or FOD there.
You know, going back to something we talked about a little bit ago, the orbit of Inspiration4, 575 kilometers higher than essentially any Americans have been since the Apollo flights to the moon. And before that, a couple of Gemini flights got up to about that altitude. But this is fairly rarefied air, so to speak, that the crew's going to. And one of the questions of Jared when they were picking the mission design was, why 575? You know, why don't you want to go, you know, typically we've been launching into 300 kilometers or so. But one of the purposes of this is to inspire. And you go a step beyond what we have done before. And so Inspiration4, the 4th flight with people out of the U.S., or as Chris said, 39A, that's where Americans leave to go to space. And here they are today. And of course, Inspiration4 representing the 4 crew members who are on board this mission.
Yeah, you make a good point with the fact that Jared wanted to inspire, and he's doing that in another way as well. You know, if you're watching on YouTube, you might notice that there is a donation button for St. Jude Children's Hospital. We are fundraising money for research and cures for childhood cancer, pediatric cancer, which is very near and dear to this particular mission. The individual that's seated on the far right-hand side of your screen there, that's Haley Arsenault. She is 29, and she actually is a pediatric cancer survivor. She had bone cancer when she was about 10 years old, and had a surgery to remove it, and underwent very intense treatment. And during that process, she decided that she wanted to grow up and be a medical professional and work at St. Jude. And that's what she does now. She's a physician's assistant there. And she is representing the pillar of hope on today's mission.
Right, and this mission is a fundraising event. So if you are watching, as Kate said, on YouTube, there is a donation button. So please donate what you can. We've so far raised about $133,000 on the YouTube channel so far.
So if you've just recently joined us, on the right-hand side of your screen there is the Inspiration4 crew. They are in their seats. The seats have been rotated back to launch position. They have undergone comms and leak checks. And the view on your right is the Dragon capsule. That's where they're seated inside of that conical section. And we are awaiting a liftoff here in 1 hour and 53 minutes. Right now, the crew there inside that crew access arm is pressurizing the side hatch and basically working through the process to close the side hatch, lock it up, and retract the crew access arm.
Right now, we're just inside T-minus 1 hour, 53 minutes. Major activity coming up here as we are working the closing of the side hatch and then the leak check. Roughly about the same time, we ought to hear another series of communications checks. Earlier, we heard 3 comm checks from the crew down through the umbilical, which is the electrical line that connects the ground to the spacecraft. Then they also did a comm check over radio frequency to our ground stations there at Cape Canaveral. And then we also did a communication check through NASA's tracking and data relay satellites that are up in geosynchronous orbit, which we'll use during the mission. But one last group still to talk to is the SpaceX Falcon 9 launch team. So right now we've got hatch closed. You can see everybody peering at it, making sure it seems look good. And then we'll wait to start a clock and see that the hatch closure is good. And at the same time, listen to the crew eventually talk to Falcon 9 launch team. As we go past liftoff, you will hear call-outs. Falcon 9 avionics, guidance navigation and control engineer, propulsion engineer will be reading out status, and that'll be actually going from the firing room 4 up to the crew to let them know that things are looking good. So we're going to do a comm check to make sure all of those engineers can also talk to the crew and that each other can hear. Meanwhile, as we wait for comm checks and confirmations that the side hatch closure is checked out, successful, in the area we've got Falcon 9 team is clearing the flight hazard and the flight caution area, T-minus 2 hours. These are larger areas around the Complex 39A. So roadblocks are down.
Dragon SpaceX, we are commencing health checks for the launch escape system. Expect a momentary flight computer change, followed by a transition back to pad hatch closed.
And copy that, SpaceX standing by.
Yeah, we're going to do a quick check here that's planned on Dragon. This just changes what we call a command sequence on Dragon. They're not actually opening the side hatch and then going back to close it. That just changes states in their displays. But as I mentioned, we are clearing hazard and caution areas. No indications of any issues right now. We'll wrap that up in another half an hour or so. Falcon 9's looking good right now. Dragon obviously looking good. And the weather continues to cooperate. What we all like to talk about, but you can't do anything about it. With that, Andy, how are things looking on your end?
Yeah, our crew today, Jared, Cyan, Haley, and Chris have been training for this journey pretty much ever since the announcement that they had all been selected as crewmates for the Inspiration4 mission back in March. What's super cool is that they're going through the same Dragon training as our NASA astronauts. And to prepare the Inspiration4 crew for their mission, our teams at SpaceX have spent the last several months teaching the crew about orbital mechanics, how to live in space, and even running simulations of what a full mission could look like while seated inside of Dragon.
The Inspiration4 crew has completed numerous simulations, including a 30-hour and 12-hour end-to-end simulation in our Dragon trainer. They trained not only at SpaceX, but they also did some centrifuge training. They flew fighter jets, and there's a photo from their fighter jet experience.
Yeah, I love the name that Haley got, the G Monster, because she pulled 8 Gs in the fighter jet, and she wanted it.
Right.
She's an absolute adventurer. I love it.
Yeah, that looked super exciting. They also completed a 0G flight, which simulated microgravity for a very short period of time, but there's a photo of them flying high there.
They all look like they're superheroes.
Right. Love it. They also climbed Mount Rainier in Washington together, which was a tough hike, 10-hour hike up the mountainside. But it looks like from that photo they're almost enjoying themselves.
Yes. I believe it was a pretty strenuous hike up, and they also camped up there for several days at a ridge on Mount Rainier.
And then they even signed a Falcon 9 booster, which is their booster that is currently on the pad. And you can see them standing in front of the booster with their signatures there. Tradition started by the Crew 2 members that they are following in their footsteps with this. It's pretty incredible to see them. This team has studied nearly 100 different training lessons covering all aspects of the mission. At the end of training each week, the crew recorded video diaries of their experiences. In their own words, here's the crew talking about their various training over the last 6 months.
Jared Isaacman here, Commander Inspiration 4, and we're like 4 months and a day away from our intended launch date.
This week was really intense because we had a lot of the systems. We got to go into the sim.
Going through some CRM training and looking at what the mission overview is going to look like.
Talked a lot about teamwork and the SpaceX culture.
Week 2 of training at SpaceX complete. This was a heavy week.
I just completed another week at SpaceX and it was intense.
A lot of good building blocks. So you start in the beginning of the week with smaller things like losing comms to, okay, some circumstances are not so good, and then some get really bad where you have to plan an emergency deorbit, which we initiate ourselves in that.
But man, challenging. I didn't realize how much upper body strength I need, so I need to hit the gym the next couple of months and build up some more muscles.
Today was my favorite day of training because today was the medical training day.
Learn some more about some of the medical experiments we're going to be working with and helping to advance what we know about humans in spaceflight.
We've all contributed all sorts of fluids now to the greater scientific cause.
But the best part is we all got in our spacesuits together.
We got to wear spacesuits, strap into the simulator, and feel like we were actually going to space.
Hello again, Chris here, and it's August 2nd, 2021. 44 days from our launch here in September. Everything keeps going to plan, and it's been an incredible week last week, working with SpaceX teams down at the Kennedy Space Center, and then back here in Hawthorne this week for some sims.
This spacesuit that I got fitted for about 7 months ago, I actually get to see and try on and do a bunch of maneuvers in to make sure that it's comfortable and that I can move. And I am just so excited for this because, I mean, this is the spacesuit I'm going to wear leaving the planet.
I'm just so honored and thankful and grateful to be a part of this historic mission and a part of the SpaceX team.
Y'all are working so hard to get to Mars and beyond. We want to provide great data, and we're really excited to be part of this.
All right, well, thanks everybody for a fantastic time here in Hawthorne, and also down at Kennedy. We've been doing training down there as well, so really appreciate everything you guys been doing.
This is my final call here from SpaceX, so Rook signing off.
Please begin the comm check with the crew.
Dragon, GNC on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, GNC. How me?
GNC loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by propulsion.
And what you're hearing right now, comm checks
Dragon prop on countdown. Comm check.
between Dragon and the Falcon 9 launch team in firing room 4.
Prop, loud and clear. Godspeed. Have a good flight today. Stand by for comm check with the avionics engineer.
Dragon and avionics on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, avionics, tell me.
Avionics loud and clear. Stand by for the comm check by the ground segment engineer.
Say that again.
Dragon ground segment on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, ground segment, tell me.
Ground segment loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by launch control.
Dragon launch control on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, launch control, tell me.
Launch control loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by the chief engineer.
Dragon, Chief Engineer on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, first, tell me.
Have you loud and clear. Have a great flight. This completes our comm check.
Just inside T-minus 1 hour and 43 minutes. We've heard the comm checks between the Inspiration4 crew up in the Dragon capsule, up at the very top on the picture at the left, behind where the crew access arm is. That's where Dragon is with the crew right now. They're talking to the Falcon 9 launch team, located in firing room 4, just a few miles just west of the launch pad. Got a great view out the windows. Earlier we saw a picture of the crew signing their names on the booster that has flown to space a couple of times, and that's an example of reusability of the Falcon 9. And we've talked reusability several times in the webcast, and our boss Elon Musk, he's made it clear for years and years, the holy grail of space travel, what opens up space for humanity to become a spacefaring civilization, is reusability. Without it, spaceflight is just not affordable. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, if you threw the airplane away after every flight, no one would be flying anywhere. So each step in SpaceX's history has been focusing on incorporating reusability step by step into our designs. First with Falcon 1, people may not remember, we did want to try to get the Falcon 1 first stages back so that we could look at them, not fly them again. We rolled that into Falcon 9, into Dragon, and now as we're going forward, even Starship program where everything there is reusable. So that's the holy grail. We've been attacking it a piece at a time. We're almost there. In today's flight, we're reflying both Dragon and the Falcon 9 first stage.
Yeah, the Inspiration4 mission will launch today on SpaceX's proven and reliable Falcon 9 rocket, as John just mentioned. The booster that's flying today previously supported the GPS 3.4 mission for our Space Force customer in November 2020, as well as the GPS 3.5 launch in June of earlier this year. To date, SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket has completed 138 total launches, with over half of those on reflown rockets. As for the Dragon spacecraft flying today, as I've mentioned before, it previously flew on the NASA Crew 1 mission in November of 2020. And overall, Dragon spacecrafts have completed 27 missions, including 25 visits to the International Space Station, 10 of those visits on reflown Dragons. So reusability,
Dragon SpaceX, we have a good side hatch leak check.
And copy that, SpaceX. Good side hatch leak check.
All right, that is great news. That was just confirmation that the leak check that they performed on the side hatch, everything is good. So that side hatch will remain closed until those 4 individuals splash down back on Earth in 3 days after orbiting for that duration.
Yeah, it is important, again, that we do perform that leak check, because we want to make sure that in the vacuum of space, the habitat inside of the capsule can withstand that pressure and make sure that the environment that the astronauts are in are hospitable. So that is, again, great news that we are continuing to march towards T0 on time. Everything seems to be going great so far. Kate, I do want to talk more about reusability. It is astounding that over half of our rockets are flown on reflown missions. I think one of the things is to refly rockets, you got to land them. And that, honestly, is my personal favorite. Seeing the booster come back, landing on land, landing on the drone ship. It is quite a feat. And for those that have seen the webcast, you can see the rocket on screen right now. It doesn't quite do it justice. These are massive, massive vehicles.
Yeah, they really are. That's a great point. And something that I think kind of plays with our perception of the scale of things, especially is when we see the rockets landing on the drone ships out in the ocean, because the ocean is big, right? This drone ship looks small, but realistically, the drone ship is the size of a football field. And one of my absolute favorite memories that I've had in the 7 years that I've been at SpaceX, I actually was hosting the webcast when we successfully landed on the drone ship for the first time. So for anybody that might remember those days, there were a few unsuccessful landings on the drone ship where we learned a lot and eventually led to the first successful one. And that moment is seared in my memory, and the crowd just went absolutely wild. I mean, we've had a few events where the crowd has gone absolutely wild in this building for the historic moments that we made, but that one in particular with the drone ship landing for the first time is one of my top 3 favorite memories.
Yeah, that is pretty incredible, and it's what's gotten us here today. With the Falcon and Dragon system, we've proven you can build a reliable, reusable launch system for a fraction of historical cost. Our next step is to scale that up, basically build the same kind of system, but capable of taking a lot more people to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And that is what we're doing at our Starbase location in Texas with Starship.
Yeah, it's a super exciting area down there. Starship is a fully reusable transportation system designed to carry both crew and cargo to Earth orbit, the moon, Mars, and beyond. You can see it there on your photo. That was the first time that we stacked the Starship booster with the Starship flight vehicle and the grid fins that you see there. I can't possibly describe the scale. You know, we were just talking about, right, drone ship landings. Oh, everything seems so small. I mean, just multiply that feeling times 100 when you envision Starship. The first time I saw it with my own eyes, I wept with joy. It's just an incredible monster of a vehicle, and there's a view of that stacking next to what is essentially a fixed service structure there. And yeah, so it's super exciting to follow along with all the advancements. Everybody knows that it changes not on a monthly, not on a weekly, but a daily basis there in Starbase, Texas.
Yeah, and what I love that Starship is doing is they're very manufacturing and production focused, and that is very key for us to continue to fly and reuse these vehicles and learn as much as possible. But we also need to build them in the first place. And the faster that we can build, the more that we can learn about designing it for manufacturability, designing it for that reusability. And again, we've done so much of that with Falcon and Dragon, and now taking that to Starship and using all that knowledge and just constantly improving our manufacturing and production of these vehicles.
Absolutely. There's the innovation there, regardless of success or failure. It is constant because we're learning just every second that we continue to build down there.
Yeah, super excited to see what Starship has for us in the future. But we are marching towards 1 hour and 35 minutes until liftoff. Let's talk a little bit more about the mission today. So the crew is not going to the International Space Station. They will be lifting off from Pad 39A, spending about 3 days in orbit at a flight apogee of 575 kilometers. Here is an animation of where the crew will be at altitude-wise. They're going to be higher than the International Space Station, higher than the Hubble telescope, honestly higher than any humans other than those that went to the moon.
Yeah, and you see that it's a little bit further out than the International Space Station. It will take a couple burns, about 45 minutes apart, for us to raise to that cruising orbit. And just something unique to that, if you followed along with our crew missions, there are multiple transfer burns that get us to the International Space Station. It's extremely precise maneuvering that needs to happen in order to dock with the International Space Station. As a reminder, these vehicles are going at 17,500 miles per hour. We don't need to do that for this mission. So we just need a couple burns to get us to that very far out orbit of 575 kilometers.
One thing we ought to alert folks is they watch the ascent and we see the second stage. We typically put up the velocity and the altitude of each of the vehicles. The Falcon 9 will put Dragon into the low Earth orbit about 190 kilometers by 575. So they don't go into the final orbit right away. Jesse, as you just said, we're going to very quickly after we get into orbit, I think before they take suits off or anything, we'll do burns of the Draco engines, the smaller ones, to lift that orbit a couple of steps to 575. So if you're watching in the webcast and you go, wow, the Dragon just separated, why isn't it showing 575 kilometers? That's because we've got 2 more burns that we still got to go through.
Incredible shot there of pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center. And like Andy mentioned before, this is going to 575 kilometers. This is the furthest that humans will have traveled away from planet Earth since the end of the Apollo program in 1972. So we are continuing to march toward T0, and it's safe to say that the energy is growing. It's becoming more and more real. I mean, with a blue sky like that, how can it not be real that, we're going to space today, hopefully. So proceeding towards the 1.5 hour mark here away from liftoff.
Yep. As Kate mentioned, 1.5 hours, a little bit more to go. In that view you see on your screens, the sun slowly beginning to set over Florida. Blue skies, wispy clouds. The weather continues to look good. Again, 90% probability of good weather, although for some reason they always like to report the probability of violation as 10%. So we look at the flip side and say 90% good weather. We will continue to watch as we get close in the next 90 minutes to T0 and the sun sets. Looking at ground level winds, and we're looking to see if there might be a pop-up thunder shower somewhere that creates what they call anvil clouds. That's something you don't want to fly the spacecraft through. The other thing that we've got is, I mentioned earlier, we are releasing balloons. The range is releasing balloons that allow us to measure wind speed and wind shear in the upper altitudes. Right now, the balloon data coming back shows upper altitude looks well behaved, so the weather, both here and around the world for the next few days, continuing to look good.
Yeah, John, you're mentioning this weather, and this is a very unique mission. Again, we're not going to the International Space Station, so we do have to make sure that weather is good on liftoff and returning back home. So the procedure for picking the launch window is actually a little bit different. We reserved a couple of days, a couple of 24-hour days for the mission, but had to wait until L-5 or 5 days before the first launch day that was selected to narrow it down to 12 hours. And then after that, we waited until L-3 to select the 5-hour launch window that we have today. And then we have 4 opportunities in each of those launch windows about an hour apart to lift off. So it's a very unique case. So we really just knew just 3 days ago what the T0 in the launch window would be.
Yeah, and one point to make, we may hear it from the crew, there are 4 launch opportunities in the 5-hour window that we're getting ready to come into here in 90 minutes. Right now we're also listening in for a quickie launch escape system check that the Dragon team's supposed to do at about T-minus 90 minutes. While we're waiting for that, you may hear the term T01. The tablets that the crew has, that Jarrett, mission commander, has, are set up for the first launch opportunity coming up in just under 90 minutes. So they call that one T01. The next one, about 102 minutes after that, is T02, then T03, and T04. But right now, everything continues to look good for T01 at 8:02 and 56 seconds p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time.
On screen right now is the crew on the left-hand side. On the foreground is Jared Isaacman. He is the mission commander, and we saw him interacting with the touchscreen monitors that are in front of them. Those will provide the crew with telemetry data, engine data, really anything they need for the mission. And now that the seats have been reclined upwards, they have access to those screens now.
As John mentioned before, we have a 5-hour launch window tonight with 4 opportunities in that 5-hour window. And the reason we actually have a window for a crew mission this time is, like Jesse said earlier, we're not going to the space station. So with space stations, it's an instantaneous launch window, really a moment, a fraction of a second, because of the final destination being the space station and having to chase it, catch up to it. Since we're not doing that today, the crew is actually going to an altitude above the space station. They'll be cruising around 575 kilometers above Earth. Because we're not chasing the station specifically, we have a little bit more flexibility to today's launch opportunities.
You're just now joining us. What you are seeing on your screen is the first all-civilian crew, Inspiration4. They're all strapped into their seats inside of Dragon Resilience, preparing for T0 shortly here. We're just at T-minus 1 hour and 27 minutes. And they're completing some final procedures here. They've already done comms checks, suit leak checks, closed the hatch and done the hatch leak check. So the closeout team has exited the, or will be, they're preparing to finish their procedures there, and will be exiting the crew arm in roughly 26 minutes or so.
Yes, a lot of notable milestones of this mission. So Haley Arsenault will be the youngest American to go into space. She will be also the first with a prosthetic. Dr. Cyan Proctor will be the first Black female pilot of a spacecraft. This is the furthest that we're going to be sending humans since the Apollo missions. And I'm trying to recall them all in my mind. This is the first time that we're going to be having 3 Dragons in orbit. So we currently have 1 cargo Dragon and 1 crew Dragon at the International Space Station. This will be the 3rd. So a lot of exciting things to happen as part of today's Inspiration4 mission.
Exactly. It's been an exciting day so far. And if you're just now joining us, you are watching the very first all-civilian mission to orbit, known as Inspiration4. At T-minus 7 hours, the crew woke up. Shortly after that, they performed some medical checks prior to their first meal of the day, which they had at Hangar X with some friends and family, and then followed by crew walkout of Hangar X as they made their way to their Teslas.
Yep, and they hopped into the Teslas and made their way towards the suit-up room, SpaceX's debut of the suit-up room in the Falcon support building. They attended the pre-launch briefing there, and then also began donning their spacesuits.
And then, of course, at around T-minus 3 hours, we had the crew walkout. That was followed by the transportation to the pad and hopping in the elevators, ascending the tower that you see there on the right-hand side of your screen. Made one last phone call to their friends and family before, heading down to the White Room, which is the area that they get to sign their names prior to hopping in.
Yep, and then the crew got inside the Dragon capsule, a process also known as ingress. We performed some communication checks. We rotated the seats upwards. And then before hatch closeout, we performed suit leak checkouts, as well as final interior inspections of any type of debris inside of the Dragon capsule.
And then we saw the closure of the side hatch. They performed the leak check on that side hatch. We got good news there. Everything was good. And at this point, we are awaiting the LES checks, which will, once those are complete, we'll get the okay for the closeout crew to leave the white room.
Then we get inside T-minus 1 hour. Things get, that's where it finally starts to pick up. We'll be having the various teams poll themselves. The Dragon team's mission director checking out. Chief engineer is going to be doing polls. The launch director does poll. The closeout team gets clear of the blast danger area at T-minus 50 minutes. And then the biggies, the dynamic event, so to speak, 45 minutes, we do the prop load go for prop and for launch. We'll then retract the crew access arm. So the arm that you see on the right-hand side that's up against Dragon right now, even with the hatch closed, that'll retract away. It takes a couple of minutes. Once that's out of the way, the crew's going to arm the launch escape system. Getting exciting already. Propellant load will begin at T-minus 35 minutes, as is traditional for Falcon 9, and then we will count down for an on-time launch at 8:02:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Now, one thing, we're going to a 575 kilometer altitude orbit today. Dragon will take itself up there after the Falcon 9 drops it off. And I was looking on my maps, and from here to the Golden Gate Bridge, Hawthorne, California, where we're seeing the Golden Gate Bridge, is 573 kilometers. So if you drove from here to the Golden Gate Bridge, take us about the same amount of time as when crew woke up at T-minus 8 hours or so. You could get there and do the same distance. The only difference is, well, I may be doing the speed limit all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge. You'll never get to space trying to drive your car vertically upwards. It takes a lot more energy over a short period of time, and that's one thing that makes, as we like to say, launch is hard or space is hard. You've got to essentially take, as Kate mentioned earlier, that 1 million pounds of propellant and find a way to burn it in 10 minutes so you can get your velocity up to 17,500 miles an hour, about 7.5 kilometers per second, and that'll finally get Falcon 9 second stage and the Dragon into orbit. Now, there's one thing I do want to mention. Dragon goes into orbit, but the second stage is going just as fast. It's just Dragon will pop off. So both will be in orbit, and then later on, the second stage comes back down to Earth, burns up. We don't try to land it. That'll be on the Starship program.
Yeah, we are about an hour and 20 minutes away from liftoff and eventual stage separation of the Dragon. But in addition to the science and supplies going up onto the Inspiration4 mission, the crew has also taken along some personal items for their 3-day trip around the planet. We caught up with the crew during training to get a little more insight on what each of them are planning to take into space.
The most special item I'm bringing up to space is this custom jewelry I had made for my wife and 2 daughters. It's a Dragon pendant, if you will, and so it'll be going in my satchel on suit-up day, and I'm gonna fly it in space for them. I think we all now have like a really close connection with dragons, and this seemed really appropriate. Something hopefully my family will want to pass along for generations to come.
What I have here today are a couple of things that my mother-in-law has asked me to take up into space for her, and some of the connections to these items are just kind of special. So what I have here are 2 pins. They're both orders of the Eastern Star. I mean, if you can take a look at that and see those, but that's that one, and then there's a smaller one here, and this guy here. But these belonged not to her, but to her great-grandmother. The reason it's important to me is not only is it talking about some history and some family connections. My grandfather on my mom's side was a Mason, and my grandmother was also an order member of the Eastern Star, and they were two of the coolest people I think I knew. My grandfather had a way of really making anyone feel at ease and welcoming anyone he saw, regardless of their background or where they were from or what they thought. And knowing that, that being able to take up little pins like this that represent something that meant a lot to him and to other folks that in my family, I think that means a lot.
I'm very happy to report that I have turned in all of my payload. I've been thinking about what I wanted to bring to space since January, and I finally turned everything in. And one thing that I'm really excited about that I'm bringing to space is this old picture of me. This is when I was 10 years old and going through bone cancer treatment. And so when I'm in space, I'm gonna pull this photo out, and now getting to be in space, my hair is gonna float everywhere, but yet hold this old picture of me and show all my patients, all these kids going through cancer treatment around the world, that there's a future, that it gets better, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Our training's going really well. One of the other big things we've been working on is our packing for space list, which, I mean, how often do you get to say that you get to pack for space? And thinking about items that are important to us, that have meaning in some way, that we really want to bring with us. And so I have an item here. It's around my neck that I will take off, and this is a ring, and it's my dad's ring, and it's really cool because it's a Thunderbird, and my dad used to wear this all the time, and he passed away when I was 19, so I don't know the origin story of this, but it's a unique design, and it's pressed into the ring, and my dad absolutely loved it. And like I said, wore it all the time, and unfortunately both my parents have passed away, so my mom, I can't even ask her, like, what's the story behind this ring? But I think my dad actually got this before he met my mom, so he's had it for a very long time. And so I'm going to bring that to space to represent my dad. I have my mom's ring here to represent her. And so I've got both my parents, and then something kind of unique and special that they got for me when I was born is this commemorative coin from the island of Guam. So it says Guam, USA, and it says where America's day begins. And so I've had this coin, and has 1970 on it because that's the year I was born. And so I feel like this is the first gift my parents ever got for me, was this coin when I was born, and I've had it now for 51 years, and so I'm bringing that to space with me. So I have my coin, and then I have my 2 rings from my parents, and I'm excited to bring them along for this incredible, amazing journey experience, and thank you for everything that you've done to help me get there.
Love seeing how they've all selected things to take with them. In space, weight is everything, so while they probably wanted to take as much as they could, there are limitations, but it seemed like the common theme was family. Personally, I think my favorite thing is the photo of Haley that she's taking. Like she said, she underwent treatment for bone cancer when she was 10, and she's taking up a photo, and of course she's going to have a photo of herself floating there with hair, and I just love that she's going to have the opportunity to show the patients that she treats at St. Jude that it gets better, and that they can grow up and be an astronaut one day too.
Yeah, I think Jared's memento of a dragon is par for the course today, as they are all seated in Dragon. So I think that him and his family are going to have tons of memories to come, and be able to share that for generations to come too.
Yeah, I love that they get to take a little bit of something with them. As we've been talking throughout this whole mission, it seems so personal. They get personalized suits, and now they get to bring something with them, some memorabilia for themselves, which I think is really important for a mission like this. So in addition to the space science, In addition to the science supplies and personal items, the Inspiration4 crew is also taking up a number of items that will be auctioned off to help raise money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. This includes an original Kings of Leon NFT that was created using live show visuals and a live recording of the band's new single, Time in Disguise, recorded during their hometown show in Nashville just a few weeks ago. The NFT was loaded onto an iPhone 12 and will be played by one of the Inspiration4 crew members while in space. And there's going to be a bunch of other cool stuff going up that will be auctioned off as well.
Yeah, there's quite a list of things that are heading up. Some of you might recall the Time magazine that was recently published with the Inspiration4 crew. I think it was such an iconic shot. It was very stoic looking. And there's going to be a copy of that flying on this mission, and the crew will autograph it after the Dragon capsule splashes down in a couple of days. And of course, something for little ones, there's a handful of plastic and plush STEM toys based on the animated series Space Racers. So again, all of these things are available through auction, which is currently live.
Yeah, I love, there's going to be a ukulele in space. Chris is going to be playing a ukulele, and then it's going to come back and be up for auction again, all for a great cause. So I'm so excited to, one, hear him play, and two, see a ukulele in space.
Yeah, and again, this mission is a fundraiser for St. Jude, and I love that they're going to even have some Inspiration4 mission jackets, which are going to feature some artwork from some of the patients at St. Jude, which is going to be pretty incredible. I think that's definitely something I'm going to try and get.
And there's something on board that I know John I loves. Pens that write in space.
Yeah.
They've got the, for those who remember, we had the Fisher space pens that worked in microgravity. And so Fisher has got a 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 that was a couple of years ago. But they're flying that in a coin set into space, and they've included material that's actually from Apollo 11. So something else interesting to bid on.
Yeah, super cool. They're also taking up a customized Mont Blanc Starwalker writing instrument, as well as some stationery that the crew will get to journal about their experience in space while they're up there. Like I mentioned before, this auction is open. Actually, it opened on Thursday, September 9th, and it will run through November with all of these different items, including the ones we mentioned and more. They'll all be available at various points during the overall mission. And you can bid on these auction items if any of them called to you. Head on over to stjude.org/inspiration4 and check them out.
We're T-minus 1 hour, 11 minutes, 21 seconds, counting down. Everything continues to go well. We also did hear during that last segment, the closeout team has left the crew access arm. So we're actually still running about 19 minutes ahead of schedule on the closeout activities. Earlier I got in my pitch for my usual, hey, launch is hard, space is hard, and this is kind of the rockets and spacecraft 101. One of the things I thought about, why is it hard? Why can't you just aim your car and go up, 575 kilometers? And we talked a little bit about, hey, you've got to get 1 million pounds of propellant. You've got to figure out how to burn it in 10 minutes. You've got to steer the rocket, so you've got to be able to have engines that move, can, withstand wind gusts, get the rockets on the right trajectory. Then we're talking about like the space pen that works in microgravity. You think about it, when our first stage is getting ready to come back to Earth, there's no gravity. So that means none of the propellant is down at the bottom of the inlets to the engines. So that's one of the things you have to work in space, both here and on Dragon. How do you get propellant into the inlet of the pumps and the valves so that instead you're not pushing gas through there? And that's a bad thing that happens when you want liquid and you only get gas going through your rocket. So that's just one of the things that we've got to do. And of course, we've got to fight the force of gravity. 9.8 meters per second squared we've got to overcome. And so I don't know about you, but when I took physics class, as always, you're sitting on a sled on a frozen pond. It's frictionless. And then how fast do you throw the bricks overboard that are on your sled? to essentially make the sled move, and how fast can you go depends on how fast you throw the bricks out. And that leads you to the famous rocket equation. Look that one up, you can see that, but essentially it all comes down to how efficient is the engine and how efficient is the structure. And in the case of the Falcon 9, we tried to be as mass efficient as we could so that we carry mostly propellant with just a thin skin of tank around it to hold it. So the more propellant you've got and the less tank and the less weight of the engines, the more efficient you're going to be, and that way you can carry more into space. And that eventually is where we're going, put humanity out into space.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit about the time of launch, and today is a little bit different because we have up to 4 opportunities to launch our Inspiration4 crew members. But if we're doing things like trying to rendezvous with the International Space Station, we have to target a very, very specific window. And so depending on the profile of the launch, how high we're sending it, which type of orbit we're sending it, liftoff time does play a factor into that.
Yeah, one of the important things on we talked about earlier is we don't have a 1 second window today. We've got a 5.2 hour window. It's a 1 second window when we're going to the space station because we have to synchronize the launch with when the space station's orbital plane is passing over Florida. It's not exactly overhead. We have to lead it a little bit. But if you think about it, in Florida, we're rotating at about almost 1,500 kilometers an hour going eastward. Doesn't feel like that, but put your seatbelts on. The Earth is rotating. That's 25 kilometers every minute. So if you waited about like a 15-minute launch window, all of a sudden the space station's 375 kilometers east of where you are on the ground, and it takes a tremendous amount of propellant to make up that kind of error. So that's one of the challenges why orbital dynamics is important. You've got to know when you're going to launch, where you're headed. A lot of people care where the sun is when you get into orbit. If you have got solar rays, then you need power right away on a satellite. So orbital dynamics, another great thing to study in school, because if you don't know where you're going to go and how to get there, you won't get there.
Yeah, John, you've been talking a lot about all the things that go into, designing and building a rocket that can do all the things that we've been doing, flying to orbit, taking payloads to orbit, taking humans to orbit. We've got a lot of history and a lot of things that we've learned. We didn't do this by ourselves. We worked very closely with NASA, and we've learned so much from them. We wouldn't be here today without the support of NASA and the knowledge that they have. Can you talk a little bit about things like the particular things that NASA has brought to the team?
Yeah, that NASA partnership goes way back. I joined SpaceX 2006, right when we were competing for what was called the COTS Space Act Agreement, the Commercial Orbital Transportation Service, where NASA said, hey, we can't pay companies to develop systems from scratch, but we can give you essentially some seed money. So they had a competition. SpaceX was one of the winners. Elon put a lot of his money in, but working with NASA on the early Falcon 9 and the Dragon, we learned things like, what are some of the best practices? A lot of our engineers would pull off of the NASA tech library, how do you do hold down systems or quick disconnect systems? What's worked in the past? So we essentially got to leverage that, all those lessons learned from decades by NASA. And then we learned things like, okay, we're going to send cargo to the space station. What does it mean to physically touch the space station? What are the requirements? Then how do you verify them to NASA? It's like somebody wants to bring a big truck into your garage and you know that your garage door is only so high. You're not just going to let them drive in. You're going to go measure that before it happens.
Yeah.
So we went from that. We took astronauts to the space station. Each step of the way, NASA's been helping us understand what it means to get into space. What are some of those requirements that we've leveraged to do human spaceflight that you see here today?
Yeah, it is super exciting. Again, we've been learning a lot from NASA throughout the years. Kate has a very special guest interview. Kate, I'll throw it to you.
Thanks, Andy. Joining us now from Cape Canaveral is none other than Charlie Bolden, former NASA astronaut and administrator. Welcome.
Kate, it's great to be with you, and I was enjoying listening to the story, and I think you all are being somewhat modest. We learned quite a bit from SpaceX as we began to partner also.
Thank you so much for that. Now, Charlie, like I mentioned, you were a NASA astronaut that then became the NASA administrator, and that happened at a pivotal time both in the history of NASA and commercial space. Were either one of those roles something that you dreamed of doing as a kid?
No, as a matter of fact, I tell kids all the time, I never dreamed of being an astronaut because I grew up in the segregated South, and that was just not something that was going to happen. I had no desire to fly airplanes. I thought flying was inherently dangerous, and but at the age of 12 in 7th grade, I fell in love with a place called the United States Naval Academy, watching a program on television called Men of Annapolis. And I struggled to get there, and when I finally got there, that led to my going into the Marine Corps, which led to my going to flight school, which led to my going to test pilot school, which led to my meeting the late great Dr. Ron McNair, who was in the first group of space shuttle astronauts selected. And he's the guy that embarrassed me into applying for the space program. So I kind of fell into it. I don't recommend that kids follow my example, though.
Well, it sounds like you've had quite the journey throughout your career. And speaking of journeys, we talked a little bit earlier about the history of Pad 39A, which we see over your shoulder there in the distance. How does space travel look different from the days when you were an astronaut compared to the last 10 years or so?
You know, Kate, I think it's dramatically different. I mean, the techniques, the orbital mechanics, everything, all the laws and everything are the same, but it's the face of space flight today that is dramatically different. I'm so excited to be here this evening for this launch because, you know, I was telling somebody earlier today, just the thought of having an all-commercial crew, a crew of non-professional astronauts lift off from the same launch pad where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin left before they stepped on the moon is just flabbergasting. It's sort of it's the complete cycle of a tale to get us from where it was nothing but government to where now we can actually have an all-civilian, all-commercial flight where NASA's really not involved at all, other than being the host here at the Kennedy Space Center.
And we're so thankful that you guys are able to host us. Now, if SpaceX were hosting you on today's mission, imagine if you were part of the Inspiration4 crew, what 2 or 3 personal items would you want to take with you?
You know, I love listening to each of the crew members talk about what they took, and on each of my flights, my very first flight, as a matter of fact, since I didn't know whether there would be any more, I took a ring that had belonged to my mother. I actually wore a pearl cross that she had worn since she was a child because it meant a lot to her. And I took very personal items also. If I were to go today, I now have a 12-week-old grandson, so I would have to take something that belongs to him, young Walker Elias, and I have 3. I'm blessed with 3 beautiful granddaughters. So my guess would be that at least 4 of those items would be from the 4 grandkids today.
You mentioned your grandkids. How do you imagine that the future of spaceflight might look whenever they are adults and possibly growing up to become astronauts themselves?
Oh. You know, Kate, I am firmly convinced that by the time Walker, who's the baby now, the 12-week-old, by the time he gets ready to go to space, we're going to be talking about, I mean, going to the moon will be, routine is not a word I like to use, so let's not do that, but it will be a place where we go with some frequency, and we'll be venturing off to Mars also. So I think there's a very good chance that probably Walker and maybe my baby granddaughter Talia will have an opportunity to be among the first people to actually set foot on Mars. So I'm very hopeful that they will end up doing that. And if they decide that they don't want to go to space, they don't want to fly, we're big proponents of, you know, Zion is actually really pushing the arts. I really agree with what she says. Arts and design are key aspects of what's required for us to even get people to space. And they are 2 areas that we should not overlook as we talk about STEM education. But the arts and design are what gives us as an example, the wonderful spacesuits that the crew is wearing today. Some designer actually sat down and thought about that that's not aerodynamic. That's actually a little arts and design there. So I think the world is the oyster for my grandchildren, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You add the A into STEM and you get STEAM, right? Now, years ago at
exactly right.
Years ago at a joint SpaceX NASA launch, you gave observers some really great advice, and that was to put their phones down and watch the launch with their own eyes and just really enjoy the experience. Now, with our Inspiration4 crew sitting in their seats, what advice would you give to those civilian astronauts as they are preparing to go to space for the first time?
Believe it or not, I sent Jared a text a few days ago, and then I had an opportunity to say hello to them before they walked out today. And my advice to them was relax, enjoy it, suck it up, really spend time in the window to look at the incredible beauty of our planet from a perspective that not very many humans will have had. We've flown 500 and some odd humans to space, but as you all keep pointing out, when I flew my Hubble Space Telescope mission, we were at 600 kilometers, and that was a view that only people who had gone to the moon had before, and we've not had any views like that since because we've just not gone that high. They are going to be in a unique position looking at this planet from almost 600 kilometers, and it's breathtakingly different from looking on board the International Space Station. That's awesome. But it's amazing how much just the additional 100 or so kilometers adds to your perspective. You don't see the whole planet, but they're going to see a lot more of it than people see from the International Space Station. And I just hope they'll take an opportunity to suck it up and enjoy it and visualize it so they can tell stories about it to their children and grandchildren and to every kid they meet when they come back. Because that's actually the most important role for an astronaut is to become storytellers and help people understand why it's important to take care of our planet and why we're running out of time, and we've got to be better stewards of the planet. So I'm excited for them to have this opportunity.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As the mission name indicates, one of the primary functions of this mission is to inspire others. So you hit the nail on the head there for sure.
Exactly.
Charlie Bolden, former NASA administrator and NASA astronaut, thank you so much for joining us today. Back over to Jesse as we continue to tick down to T0.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Charlie Bolden. That was an incredible interview and great to hear from him, our partners at NASA. It's just so great. Teamwork really makes a dream work. So if you're just now joining us, you picked a great time as we are approximately T-minus 56 minutes and counting until launch. Welcome to the coverage for the mission known as Inspiration4, the first all-civilian mission to space. Liftoff time is still holding for 8:02 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're tracking no issues with Falcon 9 or Dragon. The range is green, the weather is cooperating. Over the last 3 hours, Jared Isaacman, Dr. Cyan Proctor, Haley Arsenault, and Chris Sombrosky donned their SpaceX spacesuits in our brand new SpaceX suit-up room, and were then transported to the pad where our crew entered the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, which you've been seeing live on your screen the past few hours.
Yeah, but before we go any further, we have to get reacquainted with our crew. Let's take a moment and learn a little bit more about Jared. He is a 38-year-old Inspiration4 commander. He is the founder and chief executive officer of Shift4 Payments, a father and husband, and has set multiple world records as a pilot. When he was younger, Jared flew in over 100 air shows and dedicated every performance flight to great causes, and today is no different. This mission is named Inspiration4 in recognition of the 4-person crew's mission to inspire support for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Jared has donated $100 million himself and is hoping to raise another $100 million to support the nonprofit organization. This $200 million goal for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital would not be possible without Jared's dedication to a greater cause. Here's more about the New Jersey native and self-described aviation and aerospace fan.
I grew up in New Jersey, and when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up and be a doctor. My older brother's a doctor. I watched like the show ER as a kid, and I thought that's pretty cool. I think, saving lives is a pretty important thing. But, life took me in a different direction. My interest in aviation and aerospace goes back since I was a kid. I mean, the first computer I built, I was playing Falcon 2.0, and then upgraded to play Falcon 3.0. I went to Aviation Challenge, which is part of Space Camp as a kid. I was a observer of SpaceX from the outside looking in, like a lot of people. And then, my opportunity to kind of see what the inside was like began in October of 2020 when the idea of Inspiration4 started to come about. A big part of what we're trying to achieve with Inspiration4 is to send, an inspiring message really to the world about what is certainly possible up there in space, but also what we can accomplish here on Earth as well, which is why, this massive fundraising effort for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is such a big part of our mission. To me, having some balance where you're trying to tackle a problem of today so you can earn the right to keep making progress tomorrow is just a philosophy I've tried to live by for some time. The advice I would give my younger self, you can aim high, you can dream big, and even things that people would say is next to impossible, you can accomplish it. I totally believe we all have, that fundamental obligation to leave the world a better place than we found it. I'm Jared Isaacman, and I'm the commander of Inspiration4.
For this first all-civilian mission to orbit, Jared wanted his crewmates to represent the best of humanity, pillars he's identified as leadership, hope, generosity, and prosperity. As commander of the mission, Jared holds the seat of leadership. For the seat of hope, Jared went to St. Jude and was introduced to Haley Arsenault.
Haley is from Memphis, Tennessee, and serves as the medical officer of the Inspiration4 mission, overseeing medical care and experiments. When she was 10, she was diagnosed with bone cancer. St. Jude Children's Research Hospital helps her with groundbreaking treatment, including chemotherapy and limb-sparing surgery that resulted in replacing her femur bone with a prosthetic. Now she is currently a physician's assistant at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, the same place that saved her life so many years ago. At 29 years old, she represents a couple of firsts for this mission that's already the first civilian mission to go into space. Haley will be the youngest American to go into space and the first person to go into space with a prosthetic body part. Here is more on Haley, who occupies the seat of hope on the Inspiration4 mission.
I'm so excited to be going to space, and I'm just a regular person. I am so lucky that I got a phone call asking if I wanted to go to space. I'm from Louisiana. I was a super active, super outgoing kid, involved in everything, and I actually had just gotten my black belt in Taekwondo a couple days before I was diagnosed with cancer. I definitely am excited to represent those that aren't physically perfect. I want to bring this experience back and share with everyone I encounter, and just what this represents for the new age in space travel and who can be an astronaut. I've thought a lot about launch day. I've even had some dreams about launch day, and I still don't know what will be going through my mind. I know I'm going to be incredibly excited. And of course, I have the window seat. Looking out the window and seeing Earth from space is going to be so incredible. Can't even put into words. What I'm absolutely most excited about is we're going to call the St. Jude patients from space. And I'll get to video call these kids that I've gotten to treat, and these kids going through cancer treatment and getting to show them what life after cancer can look like. It's been incredible for me to watch how much this mission has already touched the kids at St. Jude and how much hope it's given them. I loved this one little girl I talked to recently. She said, I can't wait to be an astronaut. Like, there was no if in there. She just couldn't wait for it to happen. I think that's what hope is. I am Haley Arsenault, Medical Officer of Inspiration4.
As part of the effort to raise money for St. Jude, Jared decided to give away one seat to a person at random who donated to St. Jude's cause. That seat, the seat of generosity, went to Christopher Sombrosky. Christopher Sombrosky of Seattle, Washington is the mission specialist of today's flight, helping to manage payloads, science experiments, and communications to mission control. He is a 42-year-old mechanical and diagnostics lead at Lockheed Martin and a United States Air Force veteran. As an amateur astronomer, he grew up with a natural curiosity about outer space and even worked as a U.S. Space Camp counselor. He was awarded the Seat of Generosity after contributing to a special fundraising campaign for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Let's meet Chris, the Inspiration4.
Step 56.80, the propellant load go, no-go pole is now open.
Let's meet Chris, the Inspiration4 mission specialist.
When I found out I was going to space, I was dumbfounded. I think I was just struck dumb for days. The seed was planted for me to fall in love with space when I was little and started launching little rockets in my front yard with my dad, the first of which is still probably stuck in a Florida pine tree somewhere. But when I first saw a space shuttle launch in person from the causeway, 6 to 8 miles away, you could still feel that rumble pounding through your chest. That kind of just shifted my foundation a little bit, and I knew from there on out I had to be somehow a part of space, whether it was helping support a mission or lobbying for folks to be able to go into space. That's where I wanted to be. Of course, I'm going to be looking down at my home in Western Washington. I'm also looking to see what I don't see, and that's going to be lines on a map or those walls that seem to separate all of us ideologically or politically or even geographically or physically. Those don't exist when you get far enough out, and I'm really hoping to bring back that sense of what it means to only have that one small line that matters to all of us, and that's the atmosphere that keeps us separated from the vacuum of space. As we get to launch day, I am going to have the biggest smile going ear to ear. It's going to be, I'm going to be shaking with excitement. No fears or jitters at all about what's going to happen, but man, that's going to be a heck of a show. I'm Chris Zembrowski, mission specialist of Inspiration4.
Jared reserved the fourth seat for someone who exemplified the entrepreneurial spirit. This fourth seat, representing prosperity, was awarded to Dr. Cyan Proctor. She is from Tempe, Arizona, and serves as the pilot for today's mission. She's 51 years old, is an entrepreneur, an educator, poet, artist, and active voice in the space exploration community. She's passionate about encouraging others to use their unique space to inspire those within their reach and beyond as part of her Space to Inspire motto. Dr. Cyan was awarded the Seat of Prosperity after being selected as the top entrant of an independently judged online business competition conducted by the Shift4Shop e-commerce platform. Here's more about Dr. Proctor and her love of exploring planet Earth.
The day of launch, I'm going to be thinking about how my entire life has led up to this moment. I was born on the island of Guam, and the reason why I was born there is that my dad worked for the NASA tracking station. And so I feel like space has always been a part of me. When I got that call, that Zoom, and Jared was on there and he said that, they picked me for the prosperity seat, that I was going to go to space with him and be part of the Inspiration4, it really was like getting the golden ticket for Willy Wonka. Everything in my life finally came into focus, and I realized that it was all about this moment in time. I won the prosperity seat for Inspiration4, and I did that not as a geoscientist or an explorer or an analog astronaut, which are all on my resume. I actually won this as a poet and an artist. We are striving for that Star Trek generation, that idea of a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive space, or a Jedi space. I'm gonna be the first Black female pilot of a spacecraft ever. And to me, that just blows me away. And I wanna encourage the next generation to dream that this is possible. And a Jedi space, that's what that's about. I'm Dr. Cyan Proctor, and I'm the mission pilot for Inspiration4.
Coming up on T-minus 45 minutes, we're waiting for the launch director to give instructions to the team.
Complete, and the team is ready for crew access arm, propellant load, and launch. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD, and they'll approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort sequence. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off and relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. In the event of a fire alarm, key operators will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personnel safety is threatened, evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
There you've heard the instructions and a great view from the camera on the fixed service structure looking down the crew arm. SpaceX team has been polled. The 7 operators on Falcon 9 in firing room 4 at Kennedy Space Center have indicated they are go for propellant load of the Falcon 9 and launch. The crew is given a go. The Dragon team's given a go. We're moving into the next of the major steps, retracting the crew access arm. This will take a couple of minutes. We're going to follow that by arming the launch escape system, and then at T-minus 35 minutes, begin propellant load of the Falcon 9. And sharing in the background here at Hawthorne, keep watching the arm moving away as we get deeper into the countdown. Weather continues to be good for Falcon 9 launch. Range is ready to support. All systems remain green and go. Arm continuing to move away. Once it's in position, we ought to hear the instructions to the crew to close and lock their visors, and then arm the escape system on the Dragon spacecraft.
The countdown clock is continuing to tick, and we are now at T-minus 42 minutes from launch. We're standing by the crew arm. The crew access arm has retracted, and that is one of the last major visual milestones that we'll see in preparation for liftoff, and it's slowly moving back here, should conclude shortly. And shortly thereafter, once the crew arm has been retracted, we should hear the call out that the launch escape system is armed, and from there we'll hear that Falcon 9 prop load has started.
We saw our Inspiration4 crew members suit up about 3 hours ago in our brand new suit up room located in the Falcon support building.
Crew access arm retraction complete.
And that is good news. The crew access arm has finished retracting away from the vehicle. So the team suited up at...
SpaceX, you are go for section 7 of 4.100. Close visors and arm the launch escape system.
And copy that, SpaceX. We're go for section 7 of 4.100. We're closing visors and arming LES.
Okay, the next major step, you see the view of the crew inside the Inspiration4 capsule, closing their visors. Make sure they're locked and sealed. The next step will be arming the launch escape system. That's where the Super Draco thrusters are enabled. So if anything happens from here through the countdown or flight, Dragon has the ability to leave Falcon 9 and carry the crew into a safe recovery out in the ocean. We're waiting now for the call out. The launch escape system is armed.
Yeah, John, you mentioned the launch escape system, and
launch escape system is verified armed.
And there's that call out, the launch.
Captain SpaceX, we're closing out 4.100.
Copy that, Dragon.
There's that call out. The launch escape system is now armed. And again, this is the first of its kind escape system to provide this escape capability all the way to orbit. You can hear the team here is getting really excited as we march towards T0.
So the launch escape system, let's talk a little bit more about that. It utilizes the Super Draco engines that are installed into the Dragon capsule. There are 8 of them. There are 8 Super Draco engines on the Dragon capsule, and they're aptly named Super Dracos. They differ from the regular Dracos just a little bit. The Draco engines that are on the Dragon that help in in-orbit maneuvers, those produce about 90 pounds of force in the vacuum space. A single Super Draco engine produces 15,000 pounds of force. And so altogether, it produced over 120,000 pounds of force, and that is what is needed in case of an emergency to accelerate the Dragon capsule and crew away from any type of emergency.
Exactly. And like you said, those Super Dracos are just super powered Draco engines, and the only time they are ever utilized is in that launch abort procedures, so we are not expecting to use them today, but we do take safety very seriously, and we take every measure possible to ensure that the crew has options and has an escape in the worst of scenarios. And like Jesse mentioned before, it's the first of its kind and provides an escape capability for the crew all the way to orbit.
Yes, so that launch escape system is currently armed. Once in orbit, we actually disarm that, and we'll be relying only on the Draco engines from there on out.
Yeah. Now, next up, we will be having prop load begin, and this is basically when when Falcon comes alive. We begin to load liquid oxygen and rocket-grade kerosene, also known as RP1, into both the first and second stages. Dragon is already fully loaded. The fuels for Dragon, the hypergulls, get fully loaded down the street from pad 39A a week or two in advance to launch. So it's already locked and loaded. Up next is the prop load for Falcon 9.
One thing while we've got a moment, we were talking about Super Dracos and contingency aborts. You will hear call-outs probably during the ascent, stage 1A, stage 2A, stage 1B.
Propellant tanks will be venting for propellant load.
That just means various points in time, if an escape was necessary, the Dragon flight computer is programmed to do different things. How long the engines will burn, how long it'll wait to coast to apogee, what it'll do to come back down when the parachutes are deployed. So when you hear those, it's usually the crew giving the call out and the ground echoing it. That just indicates we are moving farther and farther away from the launch pad, and so if a contingency arose, different sequences would be performed in the Dragon flight computer. Right now, we're just 90 seconds away from the start of propellant loading. We're at T-minus 36 minutes, 26 seconds. Everything continues to look good for Crew Dragon's 4th launch with people. Today, the first all-civil mission to low Earth orbit. Now we should hear a call out right at T-minus 35 minutes when propellant load begins. Propellant loading will start on the first stage with liquid oxygen and RP1 kerosene fuel. We'll also begin loading kerosene fuel on the second stage. And it'll take us a little bit deeper into the countdown before we put liquid oxygen onto the second stage. And everything wraps up inside the last 10 minutes with the very last propellant finishing up at just T-minus 2 minutes.
So there on your screen is the Falcon 9 rocket at pad 39A, and at the very top is the Crew Dragon capsule where the Inspiration4 crew awaits liftoff in just about 35 minutes. Again, if you're just joining us, this is the first all-civilian mission to orbit, aka these are non-professional astronauts. They're people like you and me that are they're going to be going up to 575 kilometers, and they're going to be orbiting Earth there at that altitude for 3 whole days. So you can hear the voices in the background here that are getting a little louder. The excitement in the building here at SpaceX headquarters is certainly growing.
Propellant load has started.
especially with that call right there.
We're inside T-minus 35 minutes. We are right on time. Propellant load start call out has begun. The fill-in had 34 crew in just over 34 minutes.
Like Kate mentioned, are at the top of the vehicle, sitting inside of the Dragon capsule. Jared, Cyan, Haley, and Chris have been training for this journey pretty much ever since the announcement that they'd all been selected as crewmates for the Inspiration4 mission in March. What's super cool is that they are going through the same exact Dragon training as our NASA astronauts. In order to get to visit low Earth orbit, our teams at SpaceX have spent hundreds of hours teaching the crew about orbital mechanics, how to live in space and microgravity, and even running simulations of what a full mission would look like while seated inside of Dragon.
Yeah, the Inspiration4 crew has completed numerous simulations, including a 30-hour and 12-hour end-to-end simulation in our Dragon trainer. They trained not only at SpaceX, but they also did a few other trainings, centrifuge training. They flew some fighter jets together, did some aerobatics in these jets, some flips, and experienced some real G's before this mission today.
Yeah, they even got to pilot the jets themselves, which was super cool to see.
They also completed a zero-G flight, which you can see them there, almost like superheroes. They even climbed Mount Rainier in Washington, which looks like a very difficult hike.
Yes, I think during the docuseries, it was almost a whiteout condition, but they kept trekking along. It was almost 10 hours of hiking, 4,000 plus feet elevation, one of the serious hikes that you can do up in Washington.
Yeah, some great team building, and they even signed their Falcon 9 booster that is sitting on the pad, and that is them with their signatures on the vehicle that they will be lifting off in just over 30 minutes from now. This team has studied nearly 100 different training lessons covering all aspects of the mission. At the end of training each week, the crew recorded video diaries of their experiences. In their own words, here's the crew talking about their various training over the last 6 months.
Jared Isaacman here, Commander Inspiration4, and we're like 4 months and a day away from our intended launch date.
This week was really intense because we had a lot of the systems. We got to go into the sim.
Going through some CRM training and looking at what the mission overview is going to look like.
Talked a lot about teamwork and the SpaceX culture.
Week 2 of training at SpaceX complete. This was a heavy week.
I just completed another week at SpaceX, and it was intense.
A lot of good building blocks. So you start in the beginning of the week with smaller things like losing comms to, okay, some circumstances are not so good, and then some get really bad where you have to, plan an emergency deorbit, which we initiate ourselves in that.
But man, challenging. I didn't realize how much upper body strength I need, so I need to hit the gym the next couple of months and build up some more muscles.
Today was my favorite day of training because today was the medical training day.
Learn some more about some of the medical experiments we're going to be working with and helping to advance what we know about humans in spaceflight.
We've all contributed all sorts of fluids now to the greater scientific cause.
But the best part is we all got in our spacesuits together.
We got to wear spacesuits, strap into the simulator, and feel like we were actually going to space.
Hello again, Chris here, and it's August 2nd, 2021, 44 days from our launch here in September. Everything keeps going to plan, and it's been an incredible week last week, working with SpaceX teams down at Kennedy Space Center, and then back here in Hawthorne this week for some sims.
This spacesuit that I got fitted for about 7 months ago, I actually get to see and try on and do a bunch of maneuvers in to make sure that it's comfortable and that I can move. And I am just so excited for this because, I mean, this is the spacesuit I'm going to wear leaving the planet.
I'm just so honored and thankful and grateful to be a part of this historic mission and a part of the SpaceX team.
Y'all are working so hard to get to Mars and beyond. We want to provide great data, and we're really excited to be part of this.
All right, well, thanks everybody for a fantastic time here in Hawthorne and also down at Kennedy. We've been doing training down there as well. So really appreciate everything you guys been doing.
This is my final call here from SpaceX. So Rook signing off.
So incredible to get an inside look to their training. Only 553 humans have been to orbit, and most of those traveled as part of government or country-specific missions. As a result, the research conducted on those missions, particularly as it relates to humans in space, is often only accessible by the country or government that conducted the research. Think about the possibilities if the data from all those missions could be made available to the broader science community for research. Inspiration4 is a step in that direction.
The crew of Inspiration4 will conduct research in orbit that has the potential to improve human health here on Earth and for future space explorers. One of the cool things about this mission is that all biomedical data collected during the mission, things like heart rhythm and rate, blood oxygen saturation, among other things, will be accessible for research.
And to that end, SpaceX and the Inspiration4 crew are partnering with TRISH, the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, to collect data and biological samples from the crew before, during, and after this historic spaceflight. Part of NASA's Human Research Program, TRISH is a virtual institute that finds and funds disruptive science and medical technology in order to reduce health and performance risks in space explorers.
Yeah, we saw Kate with Diana earlier putting on some really colorful sunglasses. They're not really sunglasses, but it was an experiment about how do we understand motion sickness and sort of the ups and downs in space. That is something I'm super excited about because I get a lot of motion sickness here, and so I'm hoping that it helps a lot of people.
Cool to see firsthand some of the equipment that the crew has in their cargo hold. Like we've said before, this is a science mission in addition to it's a 3-day science mission basically. And one of the other things that Diana showed us was the ultrasound reader and how the intracranial fluid changes while you're in space. So lack of gravity essentially means that instead of the fluids in your body being concentrated towards your feet, they kind of they equalize towards your head, which can affect vision. And they are planning to use that ultrasound reader, which they just plug right into an iPad to do readings live inside Crew Dragon of their eyeballs while they're in space for 3 days.
That was so cool to see.
Yeah.
In addition to all the awesome science going up on today's mission, the Inspiration4 team is also using this mission to bring awareness and help fundraise for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The Children's Research Hospital opened in Memphis, Tennessee in 1962, and ever since has been committed to finding cures for kids with cancer and other life-threatening diseases, regardless of their socioeconomic status, race, belief, or ethnicity. St. Jude has invented treatments that help to push the overall childhood cancer survival rate from 20% to more than 80% in the United States. In developing countries, that number is unfortunately not that high, with fewer than 1 in 5 children with cancer surviving. St. Jude has a bold mission to change that.
The Inspiration4 mission is part of an ambitious fundraising goal to give hope to all kids with cancer and other life-threatening diseases. The goal is to raise $200 million for St. Jude. Jared already committed $100 million. Jared already committed $100 million of his own money, and the team has raised about $30 million so far, but we still have a ways to go. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice that there's a donation button where you can make your own contribution. Any amount, big or small, makes a big difference, and it's super easy to do. So go ahead and click the donate button and give what you can to help save a child's life.
Beyond the good this mission will do for science and childhood cancer, this mission is also exciting because it's the debut of the new Dragon cupola. I think we have some footages here of the cupola. It is going to be the largest continuous window in space ever by a factor of 2 and has over 2,000 square inches of viewing area.
Yeah, and there's a lot that went into the design for this. You know, this is going to outer space, so it needs to be designed and tested for, you know, all the loads that it will see while it's out in space. It's a great view to look out of, but it also needs to act as a fully functioning portion of the spacecraft.
Yeah, we were talking about reusability earlier, and this capsule is being used for the second time on this mission. It previously supported the Crew 1 mission in November of last year, but this cupola is brand new to this capsule, brand new to SpaceX. We're debuting it on this mission, and it is there's a view of it there in an anechoic chamber, and it's just incredible that we're basically going to have 360 views of space from the forward hatch there of the Crew Dragon capsule. And this is an animation showing how its position in Crew Dragon is a little different. So Crew Dragon used to dock autonomously, or does dock autonomously to the International Space Station, that port there being underneath the nose cone, and that was
dynamic pressure on
Back to Earth continues on its journey with the third event.
Once we hit T0, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off from historic launch pad 39A and make their ascent. At about 50 seconds into flight, Falcon 9's engines will throttle down to help pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure on the rocket, or what we typically refer to as max Q. And it's worth noting that once we
are through the period of maximum dynamics from the second stage, with the first stage making its way back to Earth for landing, as the second stage continues on its journey with the third event,
which is SES-1, or Second Engine Start 1, and that is where the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage lights up and propels the second stage along with our Inspiration4 crew to orbit. As Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit, Stage 1 will execute 2 burns in order to make its way back to Earth. The first is the entry burn, which is where 3 of those 9 Merlin 1D engines will reignite and then shut down, and that'll help slow the stage down in preparation for entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
While the first stage is heading back to Earth, the second stage will cut off its 1 Merlin engine that was ignited right after stage separation. Once this happens, we will wait for confirmation of a good orbital insertion. About 90 seconds after Dragon gets into orbit, Falcon 9 will land back on Earth. The landing burn, a single engine burn, will bring the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land on the drone ship about 9.5 minutes into the mission.
While Falcon 9 first stage is landing, Dragon is preparing to separate from the second stage. At about 3 minutes after the second stage gets into orbit, we should have a great view of Dragon with its 4-person crew drifting away from the second stage. Once Dragon is a short distance away, it will begin checking out its Draco maneuvering thrusters to make sure Dragon continues to increase separation distance from the second stage.
It's getting very exciting here in Hawthorne. The nose cone deploy sequence will initiate just before T plus 12 minutes and end around the T plus 15-minute mark. We do expect to see our first glimpse of the Dragon cupola in outer space at this time.
We've just heard it. T minus 20 minutes, 5 seconds counting. Stage 2 fuel load is complete. Now we're under 20 minutes to liftoff. It's been a wonderful day for today's Inspiration4 mission, the first all-civilian mission to space. And if you joined us earlier in the broadcast, we had a pretty important question for the Inspiration4 crew that remains unresolved. For those of you who missed that, here's your chance to weigh in.
All right, if I had to choose between Star Wars, Star Trek, and then one of my other favorites is Stargate, SG-1, I would rather trek across the universe than fight my way.
I've heard, are you a Star Wars guy? Are you a Star Trek guy? Those used to be true. I really think I'm a Battlestar Galactica guy, to be honest.
There's no question it's Star Wars. Like, I'm a Star Wars fan, for sure. I would say that if I had to guess, it's a split crew between Star Wars and Star Trek. I don't know if anyone else would have dropped Battlestar Galactica. I don't know on that one.
Can't beat Captain Adama.
I think Jared is Star Wars, Cyan is Star Wars, Chris is the wild card, but I think he's Star Wars.
Oh, Jared is definitely Star Wars. I think Chris is probably Star Trek, but I'm not 100% sure. And I would think that Haley, she's the youngest, so I think maybe Star Wars. I think Star Trek is too old for her.
Oh, I'm Star Trek, all the way. I wanted to be Bones. I kind of am. I'm a medical officer, so.
I don't know if we're like completely unified around that. I mean, there is other, you know, sci-fi, you know, spacey stuff that that comes before Star Trek.
Okay.
They don't know they're wrong. Like that just they'll learn that over time. Like.
I like Jared's last little comment there. They don't know they're wrong. When you're the commander of the mission, I wonder what your vote counts. Just under T minus 18 minutes, everything continues to go well. We're getting ready to start LOX loading on the second stage. That'll bring us another step closer to launch at 8:02:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Falcon 9 is going to take Dragon into its orbit of about 190 by 575 kilometers. Shortly after that, we will raise Dragon's orbit to 575 kilometers in a circular orbit, higher than the space station, higher than the space telescope. For 3 days, a series of amazing views that Jared and the team should have looking through the windows and the cupola up there on the Inspiration4 Dragon.
This crew will see about 15 orbits a day at this altitude. They'll get to experience 15 sunrises and 15 sunsets, which should be pretty incredible. And just as a comparison, John mentioned the International Space Station is going to be a little bit lower than where this crew is going to. Because the International Space Station is closer, it takes a little less time to orbit the Earth, so they see 16 orbits a day, relative to what this Inspiration4 crew will see will be 15 orbits a day.
I do want to comment on what we're seeing on screen. This is the Falcon 9 rocket.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
That was the call for Stage 2 liquid oxygen loading. You can start to see some white clouds around Falcon 9. That is normal and expected for us at this stage in the countdown. We are topping off that super chilled liquid oxygen, and when it reaches the warmer ambient air temperatures of Florida, it starts to condense and form those clouds that you see.
Now, if you notice that the second stage there is a slightly whiter shade than the first stage, that's because the first stage has been reused twice before. It previously supported the GPS 3.4 and GPS 3.5 missions, back in 2020 and 2021 of this year. So that booster is making its third flight today. The Dragon capsule is making its second flight. It previously flew on the NASA Crew 1 mission to the International Space Station. So that's why the second stage looks a little different than the first stage there, just underneath it.
Again, if you're just now joining us, you are tuned in to the first all-civilian mission to orbit known as Inspiration4. It's getting very exciting here. We're just a little over T-minus 15 minutes from T0.
And we started covering the action at T-minus 4 hours with the crew walking out of Hangar X. They made their way over to the Falcon support building where they got suited up. And then we saw them hop in the Teslas, ride up to the pad, go up the fixed service structure and walk down that lit crew access arm that we see there connecting Falcon 9 to the tower. And it's hard to believe that we're now under 15 minutes before launching the first all-civilian mission to orbit. Again, these are 4 non-professional astronauts. They're people just like us, and they're going to be going to space for 3 days. They're going to be orbiting Earth at 17,500 miles per hour. So they're basically going so fast that they won't fall back to Earth until we tell Dragon to do so. And they're going to be going up to a height of 575 kilometers.
Yep, and at those speeds and at those altitudes, they're going to be doing tons of science, which is super cool. And all of that data is going to be available for folks to continue to push the boundaries of what human space exploration will be in their near future.
So that's a live view of Falcon 9 with Crew Dragon for the Inspiration4 mission sitting on top. There we can see our 4 soon-to-be astronauts there, comfortable in their seats. Throughout the day, we have seen a lot of camaraderie, a lot of joking, and I imagine that things are starting to get a little more serious. They're really focusing in on the task at hand, which is going to space in just a little over 13 minutes.
Yeah, this is very exciting. If you've been following along, they do have a Netflix documentary following their journey all the way up until this point. And the crew has just been so incredible. It's been so amazing to watch them throughout this whole process, and very excited to see them strapped in their seats, ready to go.
We're just inside T-minus 13 minutes, counting down. Everything is still looking good for launch of Falcon 9 and Dragon at 8 hours, 2 minutes, 56 seconds Eastern Daylight Saving Time, coming up very shortly. Falcon 9 did begin propellant loading on time at T-minus 35 minutes. Loading of the RP1 kerosene fuel onto the second stage is complete. That closed out right on time. Fuel loading is continuing on the larger first stage tank. It's about half full right now. That'll finish at T-minus 6 minutes. We ought to hear that call out on the webcast. We're continuing to load densified liquid oxygen onto the first stage and into the second stage tanks. Now the liquid oxygen load will wrap up at about T-minus 3 minutes on first stage, T-minus 2 minutes on the second stage. Now a reminder, now that we are into propellant loading, we cannot stop the countdown and try to launch later in the window. So if a problem arises that requires holding the countdown clock, those dreaded words, hold, 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 we don't want to hear, we would have to scrub for the night and try again. We have a launch opportunity tomorrow just a little bit later if conditions allow. Condition of the Falcon 9 being go, the range is go. Weather, we've had great cooperation out of the Florida weather, both ground level, upper altitude, and around the world at the contingency landing sites. On the Dragon spacecraft, Dragon mission director and that team has reported no issues. They've done their communications checkouts. The crew access arm that you can see is retracted away from the Dragon spacecraft. We armed the launch escape system on time. And on the right-hand side of the monitor, you can see the 4-person crew strapped in, and they are ready to go. Coming up in about a minute, we're going to get final instructions to the crew at T-minus 10 minutes. They're going to configure their crew displays for launch, and that's a setup that'll give the crew insight into how the launch is proceeding, and it'll provide updates on vehicle health. Then we'll get a little closer, T-minus 5 minutes. We'll be into terminal count for the Dragon spacecraft. Dragon will go to internal power. We'll hear continued callouts on the countdown net as we get close to 0 and a liftoff. Now, next major event coming up right now, T-minus 10 minutes, as I said. Dragon will get its final instructions. We will also do a final series of checks of Falcon 9 telemetry against a preset limits. Make sure that all systems are go, and then we'll be moving from there into the closeouts on propellant, chilling into the engines to get ready for engine ignition down at about T-minus 2 seconds. Let's listen in on the countdown net for a minute.
Dragon SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, our displays are configured for launch.
Copy that, Dragon. And it has been an absolute honor to prepare you for this historic flight. Today, you are truly inspiring the world. We wish you a great mission, good luck, Godspeed, and enjoy the ride.
So, Kate, it looks like we passed through another event, the T-minus 10 minute call up to the crew to reconfigure. That final message from the ground team as they get ready to have Inspiration4 team inspire the world. On the Falcon 9 side, we're doing the last T-minus 10 minute checks. And the next major event coming up, I think you've got that event.
Yeah, that was, I just want to note, that was SpaceX Core, which stands for the Crew Operations and Resource Engineer. That was the voice of Sarah Gillis, and she is basically the primary resource to the crew. We can see some excitement there on the right-hand side of your screen as the crew, I think they're really starting to realize that they're going to space in under 10 minutes. Now, the next major event that we have coming up will occur at T-minus 7 minutes. You'll hear the call out for engine chill. Engine chill is simply, as the name says, we chill down some of the hardware in the engine. We're actually going to flow a little bit of the super chilled, densified liquid oxygen through the turbo pumps and allow that hardware to basically come down, the temperature come down. This allows us to avoid any thermal shock to the hardware when the full flow of super chilled liquid oxygen occurs at startup. So there on your screen, Dragon Resilience with the Inspiration4 crew strapped in their seats there at the top of the rocket. Once again, if you're just joining us, this is the first all-civilian mission to orbit, and they are going to space in 7.5 minutes. They will be ascending to an altitude of 575 kilometers above Earth and orbiting Earth at that altitude for 3 days. There's that crew there on your screen. On the far left seat is Chris Zembrowski. Next to him, Dr. Cyan Proctor, the pilot. Next to her to the right, Commander Jared Isaacman. And to the right of Jared, Haley Arsenault, the medical officer.
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
All right, there's that call that Stage 1 engine chill has started.
We don't really have a good view, but right now at the base of the Falcon 9, the 9 Merlin engines are beginning to vent a little bit of liquid oxygen overboard down into that flame bucket. As Kate says, that's chilling in the turbo pumps in preparation for going to high-speed flow at T-minus 2 seconds. Just liquid oxygen loading continuing on both first and second stage. And you can see that moist Florida air slowly breezing by the 2 chilled down liquid oxygen tanks, and you can see the mist coming off as the moisture, the humidity in the air condenses and gives you those clouds.
Yeah, that super chilled liquid oxygen coming into contact with the ambient Florida air, so creates these puffs of white clouds. As John said, completely normal. In fact, we will be seeing more of those once LOX load completes and those lines are closed off to the vehicle. Coming up in just about 10 seconds, we should be hearing the call that Dragon has been transitioned to its terminal count configuration.
Dragon has transitioned to configure for terminal count.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
Everything continuing to go on schedule. We're beginning to pressurize the tanks. That'll help stiffen the second stage up as the 2 hydraulic clamp arms will open up coming up here very shortly.
Strong back is lowering.
As you can see on the timeline there, at the bottom of your screen, the strong back retraction is the next major event. In fact, the last physical event or modification to the pad prior to liftoff. Falcon 9 is nearly fully loaded with almost 1 million pounds of liquid kerosene and liquid oxygen. That liquid oxygen is what we see venting there, those white clouds. All right, there on your screen you can see that the strong back is beginning to retract.
And Kate, that strong back will move back just a couple of degrees you see here. Then at T0, when the Falcon 9 sends the liftoff command to the ground to release it, hydraulics will bring that strong back the rest of the way to about a 45-degree position at liftoff.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
We've got the call out right on time. First stage liquid oxygen loading is complete, shutting down the ground pumps. We're down to just loading second stage liquid oxygen.
And now, under 3 minutes until the launch of Inspiration4.
Dragon has transitioned to terminal count and is on internal power.
All right, and there's that call out that Dragon is now running on its own power. It is no longer connected to the power systems of Pad 39A. As you just heard, the crowd is super excited here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, as we are now under 2.5 minutes until the launch of the Inspiration4 crew. That crew there can be seen on the right-hand side of your screen, buckled in and ready to go.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
And there's the call that Stage 2 LOX load is
Dragon
complete.
is an auto idle.
Falcon is now fully loaded with all of its propellants.
Closeout will begin shortly. Expect loud venting.
Announcement to let the crew know that as we vent off various lines on the launch pad, we'll hear some loud noises. Let the crew know that's planned. We're also right now draining the liquid oxygen out of the transporter erector, draining the lines, getting ready for launch. Waiting for the startup call at T-minus 1 minute.
FPS is on.
You can hear the cheers. We're inside 1 minute.
Go for launch.
Inspiration4 is go for launch. Punch it, SpaceX.
Commander calling down. 30 seconds. Punch it, SpaceX.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff. First stage units, go Dragon. Go Falcon. Godspeed Inspiration4.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
T plus 30 seconds. Callouts indicate nominal. Historic mission flying the Inspiration4 crew on board Dragon and Falcon 9. Great view of the crew in the capsule. We're into the throttle down, into the throttle bucket.
Stage 1 throttle down.
Throttling down in preparation for the period of maximum dynamic pressure. Minute in the flight.
9 is supersonic.
Stage 1 throttle up.
We're through the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
Copy,
We're
1
throttled
Bravo.
back up, and 1 Bravo, the call out from space. That's one of the abort sequences. That is a nominal call. Everything continues to be good. Looks like a smooth ride for the crew. Okay, we heard the call out. MVAC-D is chilling. We're beginning to get the turbo pump ready on the second stage engine for ignition. We're passing through 3 G's acceleration. Everything continues to look nominal. Merlin engines are throttling down for G limiting. 4 G's, we're holding it there for the crew. Major event coming up will be main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, looking at the second stage engine nozzle, and then ignition of the second stage.
And Miko.
Stage separation confirmed.
Ignition.
And you can see on your screen there on the right-hand side that the second stage has ignited. That's the MVAC engine. I'm sure the crew felt another kick in the G's there as it ignited. Officially, the Inspiration4 crew are now on their way to space. First stage booster there on the left-hand side of your screen is making its way back down to Earth. The grid fins have popped out to assist with the steering. It will be making a landing attempt on our drone ship. Just read the instructions, which is parked out in holding position in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, so we have a couple of views on
Acquisition
screen.
of signal, Bermuda.
As Kate mentioned, the left-hand side is a view from the top of our first stage looking down. That has already separated from the second stage, and it's making its way back to Earth. The velocity of the first
Dragon
stage
SpaceX trajectory nominal.
is being tracked on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. On the right-hand side of your screen is a view of our second stage Merlin vacuum engine. On the opposite end of that engine is the second stage and the crew, which sits on top of the second stage. Everything looks to be going normally with them. And you can also track the velocity on the second stage on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. And we also have awesome views of the crew inside of their capsule as well.
I'm pretty sure during first stage ascent, I saw Dr. Cyan Proctor. I'm pretty sure I saw Dr. Cyan Proctor give us 2 thumbs up.
Yep.
I'm sure she enjoyed this ride that she's been waiting for her entire life.
Yes. One notable thing too is we're getting some twilight views. The sun just set in Florida, but we're high enough up where the light around the horizon is also reflecting off of very high altitude objects, such as the first and second stages.
Dragon SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
Love to hear that call out, trajectory nominal from the guidance engineer. Also notice we're really up there now, well past 100 kilometers.
Acquisition of signal, New Hampshire.
Just before that view switched, we saw some teammate fist bumps going on there inside of the cabin.
Yeah, they look like they're having a fun ride there. And their journey isn't over. We've got about 7 more minutes until Dragon separates from the second stage.
Yes, next milestone for this mission is actually going to be happening on the first stage. It's going to be performing a re-entry burn that's going to be coming up around the T plus 7 minute and 30-second mark. That burn is used to slow down the first stage before it re-enters the denser parts of the atmosphere. A few minutes later, it will execute a landing burn and make an attempt to land on our drone ship that's currently parked in the Atlantic Ocean.
Dragon SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
Dragon copies.
So far,
sorry.
I was just going to say, so far, everything looking great for the Inspiration4 crew. Hearing that everything is proceeding nominally there with the second stage, which is what you see on the right-hand side.
Stage 2 propulsion is nominal.
I was just going to say that MVAC engine we just heard now is looking nominal.
About a minute left to go before the first stage performs its first burn.
And on your left-hand side, looking at the first stage, you may see those white puffs. Those are the nitrogen puffs helping to steer and guide the vehicle. Basically,
Dragon SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
Basically is the attitude control for the vehicle as it makes its way back down to Earth.
There's the crew on the right-hand side of your screen. I think I see some more thumbs up there. Dr. Proctor is clearly excited that she's finally in space. Again, this mission will be orbiting Earth for 3 days, and they will be at an altitude of 575 kilometers, which, if I remember correctly, John you said that that is the distance from Los Angeles to the Golden Gate Bridge.
There you go. They're going to get there a lot faster.
Stage 2, FTS is saved.
Right now.
So what you're seeing on screen on the left-hand side is the entry burns, the first of 2 burns on the first stage. Again, this first stage has already separated from the second stage. So the first stage is making its way back to Earth, trying to land, and the second stage, everything is going well. It is headed into orbit with the crew on board.
Actually, there on your screen, you can see a sunrise horizon there with planet Earth just behind the glowing MVAC engine.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Call out stage 2 in terminal guidance. We're at the altitude. We're working the angular momentum we need to get into the right orbit. And if you're wondering, crew's pulling about 3.5 Gs right now, less than they took on the first stage flight.
So in about 15 seconds, we are expecting
Copy Shannon.
We are expecting
throttle down.
The MVAC to throttle down and cut off in an event called second engine cutoff, and then we'll wait for the confirmation of good orbit. At the same time, the first stage will be beginning its landing burn. And here we have the MVAC. We just saw that it shut off its engine.
Stage 1, landing burn started.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
All right, good news there. The nominal orbit insertion. That's amazing news for our Inspiration4 crew.
Crews are carried right to the doorstep of an exciting and unexplored frontier. A few have come before and many are about to follow. The door's opening now, and it's pretty incredible.
Stage 1, landing is confirmed.
Dragon SpaceX launch escape system is disarmed.
And you can hear the excitement behind me. We just heard from Jared thanking everyone for making this mission possible. The Dragon capsule and crew are in a nominal orbit. In a few minutes here, we'll begin opening that. Oh, excuse me. In a few minutes here, we'll separate from the second stage, and then shortly after that, we'll begin opening that nose cone. At the same time, we landed our first stage on the drone ship, which is super exciting.
As if the second stage action wasn't exciting enough.
Right.
So there's that MVAC engine, like we mentioned before. It has already shut down in an event known as second engine cutoff. And the crew are now gliding, if you will.
Now, one thing right now is we're coming up just under 11 minutes in the flight. We're waiting another minute and a half or so before we get into the separation sequence. The second stage is going through a series of events where we make sure that gases are all pushed out of the system. There aren't any what they call disturbance torques. We want to make sure that the second stage is very stable, it's quiet, it's not moving around, it's not doing anything. So we give it a few minutes to actually just vent everything down, then go into quiet mode. Then Dragon will send the command to separate itself from the Falcon 9. It'll be pushed away. Falcon 9 stays in orbit for a while till it eventually comes back to Earth, and then Dragon moves on its way.
Yeah, John, you talked about the terminal count earlier today, and this is almost similar to that. It's like another check before the next event that happens.
The beauty of the countdown.
Okay, we're about 30 seconds away from separation of Dragon from the second stage. The view on the left-hand side of the screen is a view of the unpressurized section of Dragon. So it's the sort of back end, the trunk section of the Dragon. So when we do see separation, we'll see that kind of push away from the second stage and make its way into orbit.
Once again, the Inspiration4 has lifted off from pad 39A. They are now in orbit around Earth and
Separation confirmed.
So that is the Dragon trunk.
Dragon on behalf of the Falcon 9 team. We gave you a great ride to orbit. Enjoy your time on orbit, and we look forward to you flying again with SpaceX.
And copy that, Kerosene. We really appreciate everyone's help back in LCC.
That was the voice of SpaceX Chief Engineer Bill Gerstenmayer communicating with Inspiration4 Commander Jared Isaacman. So Dragon has separated away from the second stage. And that's the view that we have on the left-hand side of your screen. A lot of space there.
Expected
the
loss
next
of signal Bermuda and New Hampshire.
And then the next event that we are anticipating is the opening.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts.
We're going to open up that nose cone.
There we show you.
So we heard the call out, nominal Draco checkouts after separation.
And there's that first view that we have over the shoulders of Commander Jared Isaacman and pilot Cyan Proctor. Dr. Cyan Proctor is on the right-hand side, and Jared is on the left-hand side. And this is their dashboard for the next 3 days. These touch screens provide them all of the telemetry and data and information about the systems on board Dragon that they can interact with while on orbit.
We can see the zero-G indicator floating around.
And it looks like it is a little golden retriever.
Oh, like the golden retriever assistance dogs at St. Jude Children's Hospital. That is apropos.
Oh, I love it. 5th crew member on board with the Inspiration4 crew.
So in a few seconds here, we are expecting the nose cone to open up, and hopefully we'll be able to see the first views of the Dragon cupola in space.
There we can see that they have just opened up their visors.
And there is a forward hatch inside of Dragon between the cupola and the crew. So when the nose cone does deploy, they won't immediately get to see out the cupola, but once they can get out of their seats, open up that hatch, they'll get some incredible views of space. And on your right-hand screen is Mission Control Hawthorne at SpaceX headquarters here.
Once again, the cupola is the observation dome that was installed. It's brand new hardware to this mission. It is in place of what was the docking adapter, the docking mechanism that allowed Crew Dragon to previously dock with the International Space Station. Due to the fact that the space station is not our destination today, we were able to pull out that docking mechanism and insert the cupola, which will basically provide a 360 view of space for our passengers inside Crew Dragon Resilience here, which I cannot wait for our first views of the cupola. You know, everything that we've seen on the ground here, it's just incredible, and to see it actually in action with those 360 views is going to be breathtaking for us. I can't even imagine what it might be like to actually experience it in person.
Yeah, this is going to be incredible, and I can't wait for them to get the first look out, and hopefully
Lost a signal, Newfoundland.
Hopefully we'll get to see some of their reactions when they first look out that window.
Yeah, so if you are just joining us, this is the Inspiration4 mission, the first all-civilian crew into space. The team had a nominal ascent out of Pad 39A in Kennedy Space Center and are currently in orbit around the Earth.
Yeah, what an incredible place to be in right now when we can say we have now put 4 civilians into space, into orbit. It's been an incredible journey for us to get here. We didn't do this alone. There's a lot of history working with our partners, NASA, to get us to this point. A lot of efforts with reusability and reflying vehicles, which we've seen on this mission particularly. We've reflown the booster 3 times. Dragon, we flew for a second time here. First flew on Crew 1 last year. And now Jared, Cyan, Chris, and Haley are out in space.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Just the fact that these are normal, regular people, non-professional astronauts, and they're now in space. And
Acquisition signal, Okanger.
And it's just wonderful to know that the access to space has opened up. I believe in the note that Jared relayed back to ground. He said that the door is wide open and the view is spectacular. Of course, they can't quite see out through the dome just yet, as we mentioned before. But metaphorically, it must be an incredible feeling to be on board Crew Dragon at this moment.
I bet everyone's super jealous of Haley and her window seat right now.
Right.
She could just turn to her left and see everything.
Chris
also has one, yeah.
Speaking of window seats, we are approaching the coast of Ireland. We're 249 kilometers up, so we're heading from the 200 kilometers where we injected to 575, and then we'll begin circularizing the orbit. But more importantly, we got into contact with the ground station in England, and they confirmed the nose cone is open.
Amazing.
So another major event, the hooks that hold it down have opened up, and then the nose cone deploys itself up on its actuator. So that exposes the cupola, and we're going to see if we might get any kind of view here before we sign off.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, We aren't going to the International Space Station. We're actually just going out into space, into orbit. So they will be doing a couple burns. Another one will be, or the first one will be 45 minutes into flight, and then another 90 minutes into flight, and that'll take them to their final orbit of 575 kilometers away from Earth.
So at this point, it sounds like we're actually not going to be able to get views of the nose cone opening and of that cupola. So unfortunately, we won't be able to bring that to you live at the moment. However, we will be providing that footage once it becomes available. And the four of us are super excited to see what our 4 Inspiration4 astronauts are going to be seeing over the next 3 days. So at this point, Jared, Haley, Chris, and Cyan are now officially in orbit. Over the next 45 minutes, they'll reach their cruising orbit and spend the next 3 days orbiting planet Earth. We'll be checking in periodically with the crew to see how they're enjoying their first trip to orbit and to check in on those 360 views of space.
If you are curious and want to know where Dragon is at orbiting the Earth, keep tabs on the mission with the Follow Dragon tracker on SpaceX.com.
Yeah, and stay on top of any potential live events that we might be able to have with the crew while they're out in orbit by following us on social.
And finally for today, the thank yous. Kennedy Space Center, the Eastern Range for the support getting us through the countdown, the FAA for launch approval, and of course the Inspiration4 crew for their confidence in SpaceX, getting them into space today. And finally, thank you to everyone who is logged in to watch our webcast and donated to the St. Jude Children's Hospital. With that, we wish you a good day.